It's Jake Dressler. I'm an attorney in Connecticut and Massachusetts, and today I'm going to walk you through estate planning and the probate process. The first question is, what is probate? And I put a list of courts on the screen so you can kind of get an idea of how the court system works. There are different types of courts or forums where certain matters are heard. For example, in criminal court, you get people like O.J. Simpson. Small claims, you get minor disputes. And the probate court is a court where issues of end of life, guardianships, and death are heard. So if your heirs are fighting over the will or something, the probate court is the appropriate forum for those complaints to be heard. So when you die with a bunch of stuff. You have bank accounts, real property, stock accounts, etc., etc. All of your stuff is lumped into one, and it's called your estate. Your estate is what you leave behind when you die, and that's what goes into probate. Some of your stuff doesn't pass through probate, though. Some of your stuff passes automatically. For example, stock accounts with named beneficiaries. Let's say you have a Vanguard account and you went on the little tab that said name beneficiaries and you wrote in your 2 kids. Those assets pass automatically. When you die, your kids call Vanguard and Vanguard gives them the money. There's no need for that money to go through probate. Jointly owned property, jointly owned bank accounts. If you own a bank account or a property with your spouse, that passes to them automatically without the need of probate. So this is what happens when you die. Your will, assuming you have one, is entered into probate. You appoint a fiduciary, which is also called an executor or a personal representative. There are many words for it, but it's all the same thing. So the will is entered, and this fiduciary or executor takes control of all your assets. And the will gives the executor instructions on how to carry out your estate. If he's allowed to invest money in your estate, if he can sell your house, if he can make improvements on the house and then sell it. Beneficiaries have the opportunity to contest the will, which is very difficult. It's an uphill battle and usually fails. And then you have a 6-month, in Connecticut it's 6 month, or in Massachusetts it's a 1-year creditor waiting period where the estate remains open for that length of time to allow any creditors, like your electric bill you haven't paid or Target gift cards, Target credit card you haven't paid back, to come forward and present a claim on your estate. Then you have some administrative tasks like filing the inventory. Then you have to file a tax return, although taxes are rare in probate for people who are not multimillionaires. Pay any probate fees, and then you make distributions. Your executor will distribute your stuff to the people who you wanted it to go to. So estate taxes is a concern for some people. In Connecticut, if your estate is not worth over $12.9 million, there are no taxes due to you or your heirs. Your heirs get that money tax-free. It's not like income. If I made $12.9 million off the stock market, there'd be a huge tax on that. Huge. But that's not the same when it comes to inheritance. It passes tax-free. So right now, do a quick little mental search. Are you worth over $12.9 million in Connecticut? No? Congratulations. There's no taxes. But the bad news is you're not worth over $12.9 million, which would be nice. Massachusetts, that number is $2 million. So if you're worth under $2 million, there are no estate taxes to you or your heirs. What does a will do? A will appoints a trustworthy fiduciary or an executor, personal representative, whatever you want to call it. It waives certain fees that the probate court mandates, so you're allowed to say, no, I waive that fee in your will. It gives a set of instructions on how to distribute assets, and what I like about a will is that it's a very strong legal document. It's presumed valid at law. You know, like criminals are presumed innocent until proven guilty. A will is presumed valid. That means we don't question it unless someone comes forward and tries to contest it. And even in that case, it's very hard to contest a will. It makes intentions known to your family as far as burials go. And what happens if I die without a will? If you die without a will, the state distributes assets in accordance with the intestacy laws. So if you don't have a will and you die, there's a law in the law books somewhere that just says this is how we distribute your assets. And it's a very simple law. You could Google it and look more into it, but It's pretty simple. In its most basic form, it gives your stuff to your closest relatives. Like literally, it gives your stuff to your spouse first, to your kids second, or a combination of the two, to your spouse and kids. If you don't have a spouse and kids, it gives it to your parents. If you don't have parents, a spouse and kids, it gives it to your siblings. If you don't have any immediate family, the state looks for people in your bloodline. The state actually hires an investigator to try and find people like cousins or, nieces, nephews, everybody. So even if you don't have an immediate family, the state will try and find your relatives, some form of relatives. And they'll go down the line. If they go through all these different generations and they can't find anybody, then and only then will the state take your money. So that's why it's good to have like a little clause at the end that says, and in the event I have no family, give it to charity. Although that's so rare, you'd have to spend through, you'd have to have zero family at all. Who can contest my will? Beneficiaries, heirs at law. Heirs at law are people of your natural bounty, like kids. It's a very hard thing to contest, and I'll get back into that in a second. You have no obligations to anyone in your will except a spouse. A spouse can always take a spousal share, even if you disinherit them in the will. But you could avoid this with a prenup. A validly executed will is very hard to contest, but here's what you need for it. If you have two witnesses, and they have to be disinterested, meaning there's no conflict of interest, they're not named in the will, and you're of sound mind, which is a legal determination, but basically means you're not crazy, you're over the age of 18, and you're under no undue influence, no fraud, or no duress, then you have a validly executed will, and that's very hard to contest. The only way to contest it would be to attack one of these things, to say, there weren't two witnesses. There was only one witness. Not a valid will. Oh, he wasn't of sound mind. He didn't totally understand the nature of what he owned. Not a valid will. Oh, he wasn't over the age. He was 17. Not a valid will. Oh, he was under. Someone held a gun to his head. Not a valid will. And when it comes to if you look over here, you see undue influence, fraud, or duress. Undue influence is the one that comes up the most because fraud means you forged a signature and it's not really your will. Duress means someone held a gun to your head. Undue influence comes up in situations when people use their position of influence in situations with vulnerable people and pressure them to make beneficiary distributions in ways that are contrary to what they naturally would have wanted to do. So, for example, if you're watching over an elderly person and they have kids and you're their primary caretaker and you pressure them into giving you all their money instead of their natural heirs, the court may raise their eyebrows at that. But you still have to prove that it was undue influence. You're allowed to do that. Someone is allowed to give you money instead of giving it to their kids. So it's even in that situation, it's an uphill battle. Power of attorney, conservator, healthcare representative. Power of attorney allows you, this is kind of like you're cloning yourself and you're allowing a person, you're signing a document now, which allows a person to take control of your assets, not your physical well-being, but your assets. So like bank accounts, the ability to sell your house, etc., etc. A healthcare representative allows a person to make healthcare decisions for you. So when you have a power of attorney combined with a healthcare representative, you're getting very close to the status of being a conservator, which is a court-administered position that is kind of like a power of attorney on steroids. It just allows for more control, but there's also court oversight involved, which means you have to provide accountings to the court, and they got to make sure you're not stealing the guy's money. So the worst case scenario, if you die without a will, you'll die, your stuff will be passed through the laws of intestacy. The court will appoint an executor for you who might not be ideal and who will collect their fees to administer your estate, and you'll have to pay a probate bond. A trust. A trust is very similar to a will in the sense that it appoints a person to control your assets, like a will appoints an executor. And it gives your executor, or in a trust, it's called a trustee, it gives them a set of instructions on how to manage your assets, how to distribute your assets. One thing a trust can do that a will can't, a will is meant to be short-lived. It's supposed to, I had my will, we went to court, my stuff was given to my kids, and we're done. You know, a will gives the stuff you have today to whoever you want it to when you die. A trust is allowed to extend that period of time and say, we're going to hold the money for as long as we want and give out your stuff on a timeline. So, like if you want to have money given to your kid when he graduates college, and money when he gets married, and money when he has to get his first house, you can't do that with a will. You could create a trust in a will, that's called a testamentary trust, but just a will alone cannot accomplish that. Well, I hope you enjoyed that presentation, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email me or call me.